Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Billion Dollar Banker podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Perrone, and today I am so excited to have Luke Bollerman with us today.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the show. So Luke is a commercial real estate developer in short, but he's had so many amazing successes in this space, and he's done some incredible residential projects as well. He's going to be talking to us today about objective-based leadership, which is really fascinating. And just talking to Luke, you'll hear he's full of wisdom. He basically handles all operations for the property management functions, leasing, refinances, new business development, and plays a central role in implementing the vision and the strategic direction of Bollerman Companies. Bollerman Companies today owns and manages over 500,000 square feet of commercial real estate. And throughout the history of Bollerman, 17 million square feet of commercial and industrial and residential space, all in New Jersey.
All in New Jersey. Yeah.
So we're so excited to have you. And your background, it goes far before this. I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit more, because I'm sure it's how you've framed your leadership and your style and how you've approached your businesses. So
yeah, thanks. I had a circuitous path back to New Jersey. So I'm Monmouth County born and bred.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up and I went to Christian Brothers Academy and then later LaSalle University. I had a stint as a lifeguard in the Monmouth County beaches.
There you go.
Yeah. And then after graduating LaSalle, I was fortunate enough to get a job on an equity derivatives trading desk where I started out old school punching tickets. That was in the days of handwritten tickets and timestamps and all that sort of thing. So I did that for about 2 years, and I was fortunate enough to move from a clerk to a junior trading role. So I stayed on as a junior equity derivatives trader for another year. Before getting shipped off to Hong Kong, where at the very, very young, sprightly age of about 23, I got placed on an equity derivatives trading desk where we would focus on, at that time, it was they called it ex-Japan. So we would focus on everything that was non-Nikkei based, right? So that was Hang Seng, 8 shares, all of the major indices in China, including India. And it was a really, really wonderful experience. And then after I did that for about 2 years, I went back and started a trading desk with a group that I'd known from New York. And after landing from Hong Kong to New York, we worked there for about 2 weeks, and we were trying to launch some new products. And then half the desk quit.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was sitting.
Is that the first lesson in leadership there?
Well, you know what? The lesson in that was I had been brought in by a group of people, and I had to make a decision whether I was going to stay with the new group I didn't know or I was going to stay with the group that I did know. And so I went with that group, the group that had brought me in, and, we started our own desk, and we were very, very successful. Then through some mergers and acquisitions, we got rolled up by a group called ICAP, Intercapital Group, and spent some years there before I quit at the peak of my career to start developing in Monmouth County via a second generation. So started in Monmouth County, went all the way to Hong Kong, back to New York, back to Monmouth County, which is where we are now.
You couldn't have gotten any further away, and such a young age to travel. What are some of the biggest lessons that you take away from that experience that you've brought into Bollerman Companies?
I was very, very fortunate to have the experience, number one. But, I think for a young person early in your career is to kind of take those risks. It's amazing, trading equity derivatives in Asia does not have a direct correlation to building buildings in Monmouth County, right? But putting yourself out there, meeting new people, dealing with problems, figuring out circumstances, all of that is translatable to really any industry. So it really, really served me well. It was a high pressure environment. It was a very, very challenging environment. And a lot of that set the stage for, coming back into our family business and dealing with the problems that would come up inevitably in commercial real estate development.
And so how old were you then when you decided to get into the family business?
I was about 31.
Okay.
Between 30 and 31, there was a little bit of a transition period, but we had a property in Highlands, which is now Sandy Hook Bay Marina and One Willow. And I had worked on that project. So I'd always had a hand in the marina and in our development. So my first job was following behind a blue Toyota pickup truck and picking up trash and making sure that the job sites were tidy.
Were you did you look at everything happening at that young age and say, like, I want to be a part of this one day? Or did you say, because I think about people that have family businesses, and obviously there's a long history with Bollerman Company, but not every kid steps into the role and says like, I want to be a part of this. Were you excited to do that from a young age?
Yeah, the truth of the matter is I always wanted to do it, but I wasn't permitted to. I graduated college. I was president of my university. Things had gone well, so I thought my GPA could have been a little bit higher. But I wanted to join the business right away, and I wasn't permitted to. And my family said, you graduated, you're president of university, great job, go get a job, and don't call anybody via the family business. So I had to go out on my own, which brought me through through some connections to Wall Street, which was completely different. It couldn't have been any more different. After succeeding there and growing and so on and so forth, these projects that we'd been working, almost a decade on started to come to fruition. So I had to make a choice. Okay. I had to make a choice of, am I going to continue on, this business that I built, a multi-million-dollar a year business, or am I going to follow my gut, follow what I want to do, take the risk, take the pay cut, and go pursue building something. And I just thought that was more aligned and suited for me personally.
I love that. Yeah. And so now I'm going back to college now, president of your university. Is that where the first like leadership aspirations started to come up for you? Or did you know from a young age, like, I want to be a leader. I want to help grow something and create something?
I would say I probably had some of the, some of the characteristics in my personality that lent itself to leadership. But I was never shy to take a shot at something I thought could help me grow those things. It was just something that was always sort of, pestering at me, like, you can do this, or you should pursue this. And I listened to that sort of inner voice, I would say. So that manifested itself through my college years and certainly into the Wall Street years, and then inevitably into real estate development.
And so those qualities or those characteristics that you said can lend themselves to being a leader, what would you say like the top 2 or 3 were for you?
Oh my. Part of being a leader is not being afraid to get your brow beaten in. You can't be scared. And I think that anybody who's in any position of leadership, you've run teams, you're incredibly successful, you've dealt with people. What we learn from being a leader is you're not going to go into it and succeed. In fact, it's the opposite. You're going to go in and you're going to fail, and you're going to fail miserably. From the people I've talked to, CEOs, managers, executives, other people running businesses, they always themselves go back to the lessons they learned when they've lost, or when they haven't succeeded, or when they've fallen short. And I think part of what you learn, even in the early stages of leadership, whether it's at the college level or your early professional level, ultimately when you get to a real executive level, is that it's an accumulation of learning from those losses and growing from them, and that helps inform your decision making process as you start to take on more and more responsibility.
It's really interesting that you say that, because it's almost like you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to not be perfect, and that's really hard. That's hard for a lot of people. They fear failure, right?
Yeah.
And instead of looking at it as feedback or as data, it's personal, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not good at this. But you're saying that was one of the biggest things, that you were willing to accept failure, to learn from it.
Definitely. And own it, and own it. My wife has a great expression that she uses in her business, and she says, fail quickly. If you're going to fail quickly and learn from it, right? So you don't want the failure to define you. You don't want it to linger, but you're going to say, oh, wow, that didn't work, or I could have gleaned a different insight, or I would have taken that different tact. And all of that helps formulate your own being, so that you can continue to grow. And we talk about objective-based leadership. Well, how do you know what the objective is, right? So forming the objective is a big part of that, but you cannot form the correct objective unless you know what's not going to work also.
That's really important. And I'm excited to talk about objective-based leadership, because I think it's an interesting topic. And I heard the other day, like, the only way you actually really fail is by quitting. And that's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders, and I'm sure your family in this business never did. In real estate development, I'm sure there are so many ways that you can kind of move into the wrong direction with just one step, right? Sure. So can you give us an overview of kind of how it started for you with entering Bollerman, and how you kind of grew the company from there, and specifically the project One Willow? Like, tell us what was exciting about that for you. I want our viewers to know. For those of you who haven't checked out One Willow, please go. We'll be there in the summer a lot, I hope. It's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So the project at Sandy Hook Bay Marina was something that it was personal. And as we were talking a little bit before, every project in real estate, there's the commercial real estate market, the United States real estate market is so huge, right? So for what we do, we build things and we hold them. We own them. We want to establish market position. We want to buy fantastic real estate assets and hold them for generations, right? So, the internal saying is it's not my asset. It's not my father's asset. It's not my children's asset. It's something, we're just custodians of these things, right? And so what we're doing is, we want to build wonderful things that have, that will stand the test of time. And, we have that perspective. And Sandy Hook Bay Marina fits perfectly into that project type because it was a dilapidated marina. There were some other parcels that were next door to it. And we spent almost 10 years working through the approval process, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, there were lots and lots of challenges with that one. We had to get state, CAFRA, DEP, Army Corps. We had to study wave heights so that in the case of a storm, we knew that the waves wouldn't overtop the pilings. All kinds of nuanced things that you wouldn't necessarily think or know about. We dove deep into it because we love the project, and you have to wake up every day, no matter what you do, you have to wake up every day with energy and want to do it and to be passionate about it. And so
what do you think, I have to ask you there, what do you think is key to waking up with that energy and passion? What drives someone to feel that every day?
I think being true to yourself and true to, we talk about the word objective. What is the objective? If your objective is to be the best manager, right? I think it's a silly objective to say, I want to be rich. I want to make money, right? That's not a real objective. A real objective is to say, not to get, functional excellence, right? I want to be the best manager. I want to build the best team. I want to feel good about what I'm doing every day, right? So you can wake up. When I was on the Wall Street trading desk, I woke up every day and there were people making millions and millions of dollars and they were utterly miserable, right? And there were other people who were doing what they love, woke up every day, maybe weren't in that $1 million tax bracket, but were incredibly happy, right? So I think you have to find what you love to do. And ultimately, if you are the best at what you do, you love what you do, success is going to follow you. Yeah. So, if you loved hot dogs, right? Maybe you're the owner of Sabrett one day, right? So there's always a path. There's always a trajectory towards extreme success. But to your point, you have to be able to stick with it and you have to be passionate about what you do. And you have to love that and live that every single day. So wake up with enthusiasm, love what you do, and fail quickly. If it's not something you love to do, if it's not something you're passionate or energetic about it, fail quickly and move on, because otherwise you're not going to get to where you think you should be.
And do you think that the objective is that like your purpose? Is that just like the goal, or are those three things kind of aligned in some way?
Yeah. So I was thinking a lot about this when we were preparing for this. So, I think there are high level objectives, right? So when I was thinking about this, I figured maybe you'd ask me, Luke, what are your objectives, right? So I can tell you, just to use our own business experience, our objectives right now are we want to refine out, we want to be subject matter experts in our real estate investment entities and continue to grow that in core competency. And we also want to provide best in class service for any of our commercial clients. That's what we want to do, right? So if that's the high level goal, that's going to inform the decision-making process downstream of that, right? So you have to set your objective correctly. And then there will be other things downstream of that will inform that, because otherwise everything you are doing towards that goal is helping you get to that goal. Everything you're doing other than that is a distraction. It's something that's working against that goal. So I think it's really, really important to set yourself your own personal objectives. Now, everybody has different things. You may say, my objective is to get physically fit. Okay. And I think that's a really important one for everybody, whether you're in business or yourself. You only have one car for your whole life. This is it. You're driving it every day. Yeah. Right. So to me, it's important that, you take care of that vehicle. Right. So if that's important to you, is everything you're doing working towards that goal? Because everything you're not doing is working against that goal. So you have to make that distinction. And I think making the distinction in a zero-sum way is really informative.
And I would agree with that. And then when you think about leadership and your team, I'm wondering as you're speaking how critical it is. I heard on a podcast today, we were talking about podcasts. We're going to get some of your favorites, but I heard on a podcast today, like you asked the team, what do we need to do to be number one, or what do we need to do to be the best? And actually ask that question to the team, have them come up with some answers, because then it's like, well, what's standing in the way of us doing that? Why aren't we doing it? And
Right.
so can you share with us how do you share the mission or the objective with the team, and how do you get them engaged in being a part of it?
Yeah, simplify the problem, right? I think that's really issues. As if you sit in a position of leadership, if you are a manager, if you are an executive, right, you have the worst negative selection bias of all time, right? All of the terrible problems and sticky wickets and personnel issues or supply chain logistics or challenges, all that lands on your desk. And you have a team of people that you're working with, and they're looking at you and they're saying, how do we solve these problems, right? So what you need to do is simplify the problem, right? What is the problem? Is the problem logjam in our supply chain logistics? Is it a technology problem? Is it a personnel problem? Or is it the fact that we are not articulating the objective clearly, right? So we have a wonderful team at One Willow, right? At our restaurant, right? Which is, I use that as an example because it's the restaurant world can be so dynamic, right? You're dealing with people and customers, and it's retail facing, and you're dealing with multiple vendors and facilities and real estate. It's like all of the things together, right? And so what we had to do in such a dynamic environment was really simplify the objective, right? And the objective was to be the best at what we do, provide fresh quality ingredients, right? And build the best team, right? Team building was 101. So in our early years when we were launching the business and we were losing money and cash flow was tight and things were not working particularly well, we said our objective is to cultivate the best team who are experts in their fields, right? Professional managers, professional bartenders, servers, people that take this seriously and want to show up every day and perform to the best of their abilities, right? And so that process, when the world is getting thrown at you and you have this challenge and that challenge and everything else, stop for a second. Wait a minute. What is our objective? Our objective is to build the team and be the best. Okay, we may be losing a little bit of money here, or we may be on the fence about this hire, but is that person going to help us solve our objective? Are they going to help us be the best in what we do? So you may be willing to make some trade-offs you weren't thinking about unless you had the context of the bigger objective in mind.
Well, I think One Willow is a great story, because when the first shot at it, or maybe the first several, I'm vaguely recalling.
You're recalling correctly.
It wasn't working, right? Yeah.
No.
And
no,
so,
it
what
failed.
were the biggest lessons you took from that original failure? Was it about people mostly, or objective? Like, give us kind of like the rundown. What failed and what needed to be changed?
Everything failed. Everything failed in a very, very public way. So we're real estate developers. So we went out and we built the marina, we built the clubhouse, and a wonderful facility. We had great partners, everything from the lending side to our customers. And, we knew that we had to be customer centric, but as real estate developers, we didn't want to get into the restaurant business, right? We were just real estate developers. We're going to sign a lease. There were some nuances to that. And then the operator came in and he failed miserably. It was a very, very, very big challenge for us to pick up those pieces. But being an observer of that failure, we realized that he failed in his inability to put a good team around him, right? What is a company other than a collection of people working towards the same aim, right? So you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Why do you think people fail there? What is it that they can't get right? Is it that they pick the wrong people? They don't let them go quick enough? They're not. What did you see from that lesson in watching another leader not do that piece?
It's the same thing I've seen a lot of different times, and really it's ego. Right? It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not worried about who gets the credit, right? And I think that's something that I've carried with me. I heard that once before, and I've carried that through with me, because if you are, again, that's
a quote right there. I'm gonna run that back later.
Yeah,
that's a great quote.
It's true. It's true.
Great data that you took from that, because it is. As you're saying it, I'm thinking of examples where that gets in the way for people.
Sure, it's ego. I mean, certainly certain businesses are more pronounced in that. Wall Street would be a wonderful example of that, right? Where there's lots and lots of ego, or in a sales environment where there's lots and lots of ego, or where you're competing not only with the marketplace in general, but maybe with your collective group. If you have 5 salespeople working in the same thing, who's the best, so on and so forth. And sometimes you need to put that aside to get towards the bigger objective. what is the bigger objective? So in the equity derivatives world, it was always, we want to be the best equity derivatives desk, and we want to be better than our competitors, do more volume than them, and have better executions than them. But a lot of times what would get in the way of that is people's own personal agendas, right? And so it's amazing what you can accomplish when you pull that back just a little bit, right? And you work towards the collective goal. And I honestly think it's a lot of ego. And I certainly saw that in the case of the restaurant, and that was informed from my experience previously on Wall Street, where I saw that be a real sort of cancer in the degradation of the team, right? And it only takes one apple to ruin the bunch, as they say.
Right.
And so, so I think that's a really, really important thing to focus on. You know, what's my objective at a high level? And then is everything I'm doing working towards that objective? And if your individual self is working towards a different objective, right, I think you need to, realign yourself in a way.
As an employee or as a leader or as a manager, you have to be in line with the vision, the mission. If you're not, it's not the right place. And certainly if it's coming from the leader, that's a big problem. What do you think the biggest difference is between leadership and management?
Oh my. I don't think they're all that different. I don't think they're all that different. Some people might have a completely different opinion about that. I would say in order to be a good leader, you probably had to start being a good manager first, because it's very, very hard to lead people if you've never done it yourself, or you don't have a sensitivity towards what they're dealing with. Right. So it's easy. Everyone's had a boss or somebody who's come in and said, you need to do it this way, or so on and so forth. And then from the employee's perspective or for the teammates' perspective, you're gonna say, well, you can't do that. You don't know how to do that, or you're telling me how to do something, but you're not really informed because, you haven't done it the way I've done it, or I see a different pathway to doing this. And I think that's a big thing. People think leadership is being the boss. It's having command and being able to tell people what to do. But really, I think leadership comes from being a good manager first and saying, hey, listen, I understand what you're dealing with. I understand that there are these challenges over here. Tell me, how do you think we can do things better? And then you get buy-in from everybody, right? And then you're leading everybody towards the right objective.
How do you think leadership and parenting? How do you think they match up? Like where do you see the greatest qualities kind of transcending between the two?
So I have 3 young kids, and that is a very, very good question. I think that if you want your children to grow up and be well-adjusted and contribute to society and to be their best and fulfill, their own mission, that you need to be a good example. And so part of leadership is being a good example. If you can't possibly expect to be a good leader if you are not willing to walk the walk. Everybody, talk is cheap, as they say. So, when it comes down to it, when, the bombs are going off around you and things are on fire and blowing up, that really calls into question, who you are. Right. And so it's a great parallel to parenting, because anyone who has kids will tell you they may not be bombs going off, but they could be, spaghetti flying and kids screaming and so on and so forth. And so when all of that is happening, right, how do you dive deep? And so one of the things I like to do periodically is meditation, right? I think that's a really wonderful tool. And one of the meditative tools that I learned about is picturing yourself on the surface of the ocean in the middle of a hurricane, right? And there's waves and wind and everything is going crazy, right? But if you dive deep below the surface of the ocean, right, things are calm and still, right? And I think leadership is a big part of that. Things are always going on above the surface, but you have to be able to bring yourself down below that, right? And get yourself into a place where you can clearly see and synthesize things and understand what's important. And
it's nice and quiet down there. I'm picturing this quiet ocean.
It's a perfect Jersey Shore adage, because people who are at the beach can picture that, right? They can picture themselves being tousled and turned, and we often feel that way a lot of times, right? But I think part of being a leader is developing these really good healthy skills for yourself to be able to withdraw, not in that way, but from all the chaos and have perspective and look at this. And I think that's also a great thing in parenting.
Yeah. You said something that had stood out to me when we were at that event recently. And it was about parenting. It was something about like kind of like recognizing where they are. Like they're just kids, like
Yeah,
they're here. And sometimes you need to like meet them where they are. And I'm
definitely.
kind of thinking of that as you're saying that analogy. Like so many things are going through our heads as parents and so many problems and issues and things that are hitting our desk. And then we walk in and there's just these kids that are just being kids.
Yeah.
And you said something like that to me, like they're just being kids. Like you kind of have to come where they are, be where they are. And I'm kind of seeing that same analogy of like being below the ocean with them, where that in their head, everything is calm, everything's great.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of leave the waves up ahead.
Yeah. And we should, right? We
Mhm.
should, for the sake of our kids, we should do that. And for the sake of ourselves, one of the things I've done is when I walk in my house, I put my cell phone right in our little mudroom area. I put my phone and I walk away from it,
Wow.
even for an hour or two, right?
Wow, that's great.
It's really hard. It's
Mhm.
really, really hard, especially like in the days of connectivity where, there was a day I remembered, you may remember as well, where the phone didn't really ring past dinner time and
Yeah.
you didn't call people. And that's so far gone, right?
Mhm.
We've lost that. So I think it's important to the point of the kids to have that perspective. And yeah, they're little people,
Mhm.
they don't have all of the things and baggage and problems or perceived problems or emotions that we have as adults.
Mhm.
And I think we just need to recognize that for what it is and try to
Mhm.
stay true to that. It's good for it's
Mhm.
good for ourselves as adults too.
Yeah, and it's actually helping you, as I'm thinking about it, it's helping you kind of meet your objective of parenting or your objective of leadership is when you don't want people to kind of, it's like the duck, right? Like below the surface their feet are going crazy, but when you're walking into a room with your employees or with your children, you need to have kind of this calm, level-headed demeanor where you're not letting that all out on the table in front of people, because you're the one they look up to. You're the example. So if
Yeah.
you're chaotic and things are crazy,
The organization will be also.
yeah.
Yeah, if you're frenetic or, Jamie Dimon recently, said something I thought was really telling. He goes, when I walk into my office every day, everybody knows what they're doing. We're calm, we're relaxed, we know what the objectives are, and we're working towards those objectives. If
Mhm.
you walk in the office every day and you're scrambling and this and that, and you're crazy and frenetic, it's you, buddy.
Mhm.
It's you.
Yeah.
And that's true. And I took that to heart because we've all had those moments, right?
Mhm.
Even Jamie Dimon's had those moments. He's
Sure.
probably, loath to admit it, but it's true. You don't get to that perspective without having gone through it yourself. So I think that's really, really, really strong advice. And using your kids, to teach yourself that, I think can be a really good mechanism.
I agree. And now, so how many employees does Bollerman have today?
Depends on how you count. In the real estate office, we're a very, very small office. We're small but mighty. We have 10 people full time,
Okay.
that kind of work in the various investment entities and so on and so forth. But if you count things like the marina and things like the restaurant and our subcontractors, that
Mhm.
grows quite substantially. But we're small but mighty.
What do the departments within a real estate development company, what are they comprised of?
Yeah, so we have, the way the real estate company is set up is we have investment companies which
Mhm.
make investments in specific bricks and sticks, I'll say, or we build things. And then we have BRES, Bollerman Real Estate Services, which is our property management services, our real estate services division. That's where most of the employees are held,
Mhm.
or housed rather. So our employees at BRES provide things like, we have a leasing and administrative division, we have an
Mhm.
accounting division, we have property management, and then we have administration. And then we
Mm.
have my level, which is basically everything that blows up or goes crazy hits my desk.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we provide real estate services to ourselves, for our investments, but we also do third-party asset management for high net worth individuals. And also we have a specific focus in medical. One of the complexes we manage is medical office condos. So a bunch of doctors, and they each own their suites, and we provide all of their real estate services, whether that's the basic accounting functions, capital planning, capital reserves, helping them action things like new roofs, sidewalks, asphalt, all the typical things you would think about in a commercial or industrial setting. And then also work with them to understand the value of their assets and to help plan for the future.
I love that. So when with BRES, for example, I guess you can help someone, build. You could build the commercial building for them,
Sure.
and then manage the operations within it, depending upon what's in the facility. Or
Absolutely. So typically, we we didn't start off by doing third party property management for ourselves. So we don't take investors. We don't have any investors. It's our own money. We
How
look at
long ago did that come about, Brez?
1990.
Okay, so it's been around for a
Yeah,
while.
it's been around for a little while, and it was started to provide property management services to the investment companies. And then about 7 years ago, we started acquiring property management companies. And so we bought a property management company, and then we've since looked to strategically grow that segment of the business. So if you are a high net worth individual with significant real estate holdings, but you don't have the real estate infrastructure, accounting departments, legal departments, leasing departments, we would be a potential match for somebody looking to hold on to the real estate portfolio, but not necessarily manage it themselves, which is everybody loves owning real estate until a car hits the building or water heaters explode or you have to do capital planning for roofs or you're trying to figure out costing for anything,
Yeah, start leasing and you have to get you're changing over. And now is that for residential and commercial?
We don't manage residential like associations as you might think about them. It's something that could happen in the future. We've been approached, but we're very, very bespoke. So there are, companies that specialize in that, but we tend to be geared more towards medical and people that are high net worth who have very, very specific needs, as opposed to going out and trying to canvas the entire universe and scoop up as many of these contracts as you can. We're very, very particular about who we onboard.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking of a client that I have today that purchases a lot of commercial buildings where the urgent cares are going or something like that. That would be something that you would manage as an example. Okay,
absolutely.
Understood. So now tell us about kind of like the day in the life of a real estate developer. Are you constantly looking for properties? Like, how are you finding them? Like, what does it look like when you're getting to the office and you're trying to reach these objectives every day?
This is a great question. So I'll start by saying that every day that I have a plan, something gets in the way of that plan, right? Every single day. A typical day, as I had said before, when, just a little while ago, our objective, right, for Bollerman for this year was to get all of our administrative processes in place and to make sure that the administration of that company is running smoothly. That required us onboarding some new technology, some new software platforms. It required us to hire a couple of people. So that was really our objective. So I try not to get confused every day, right? So
because there's like these macro objectives and then there's all these little micro ones,
that's right?
Too.
That's right. And so, if you can't get your housekeeping in order and you don't have everything dialed in absolutely correctly, then how can you go after the macro stuff, in my opinion? So what we're trying to do is reset the foundation. We had a lot of, internally, we had a lot of employees who had been with us for 20 years and they started to roll off, right? Just they were retiring and they'd been with us for a long time and we're thankful for that. But then required us to, bring in new folks. So that was really our objective in parallel with developing some of the projects we have in the book. So we're doing an expansion for New Jersey Natural Gas Company. We have some tenant fit out that we're doing, which is sort of run of the mill stuff. But my objective for 2025 was to make sure that all of that, that those projects that we have get completed on time and that also all of our administrative processes and procedures are dialed in so that I have the opportunity to go capture some of this macro stuff. But with that being said, we're always focused on new projects and new development. We evaluate a fair amount of deals. We pass on most of them because each project requires your attention, your focus, and you better love it. I also mentioned that we're not really transactional. We establish market position. We have core competency. We work within that core competency, and then we try to grow the portfolio that way.
How important do you think that is, the core competency piece? As there's some developers that do multifamily and others that are, single family, and some are in commercial, industrial. How important do you feel like that is? I think we spoke about this in the construction world a little bit, but picking that specialty as in respects to getting to the objective, do you think it's important that you have that one thing that you're kind of the subject matter expert in?
If for us, it's everything. For some people, maybe not so much, right? Again, we're not raising outside capital. We have a couple of lines to some ultra high net worth folks that we would consider, a joint venture with because we think that they would be good strategic partners and allow us to expand our core competency. But there are other folks out there who are enormously successful. Maybe they're going to go out and raise, $200 million and then go to deploy that, right? That your core competency may be something different. It may be identifying big macro trends. I think that the Atlanta suburb is going to grow 20%. I don't have a view on that, and I'm not going to play the game because somebody else may be better at that than I am.
So how many properties would you say do you have to look at to find the one?
Ooh. Well, I already know what some of those properties are. I just haven't come to me yet.
Okay.
We play the long game, I mean, very, very simply put, there's a great quote I heard by Warren Buffett where, it's a batter and he's at the batter's box, right? And, you don't have a finite amount of pitches. You have an infinite amount of pitches, right? Not everybody has that in their business. Sometimes they have to swing, but for us, we don't have to swing. And people may be in the boxes, shouting swing bum swing, but we don't have to. So we look at our pitches, we make sure they are the right one, that they are, our core competency, that they fit in with our broader objectives, and then we'll take our shot.
Was that different in the beginning, would you say? Like if we went back to when your dad, so was it your dad or your grandfather?
My father.
Your father.
Yeah.
When he started, do you think did he have to swing more just because it was the beginning and he had to take more risk and get
Quite the opposite.
Okay.
Quite the opposite. You had to be right, And so, the thing I know is there's never a shortage of deals, right? At least in our world, there's, we see stuff all the time, and there's never a shortage of deals for us. But, you have to pick winners, and you want to pick winners. You talk about objective-based leadership. Well, how can I lead my team, to go, we're going to go over here and this is what we're going to do, if that's the wrong objective, right? So it's really, really, really fundamentally important that you pick the right things, right? Because otherwise, if you pick the wrong thing, now you're sending everybody with marching orders. Hey, we're going to go do this, and so on and so forth. That ends up being the wrong objective. I mean, that would be a terrible outcome, and an outcome that happens regularly. So for us, we wanted to make sure that, it was our core competency, and that these things fit us.
And now, how about, since you and your father, do you both share in the leadership of Bollerman? Because if you do, I'm wondering, how do you blend your leadership styles, and is there any tips that you have for working with family and making it?
So this could be its own separate podcast. And I love
how to work with family.
How to work with family. It'd be a wonderful topic, and one that's really not explored a lot. Most businesses, first generation, second, they say first generation builds it, second generation grows it, third generation blows it, right? As it goes. And because a lot of people are not ready to have the kind of conversations you need to have in order to successfully pass the baton or carry the torch. I'm very fortunate in that regard that I have a great working relationship with my father. He has, he started things, and but he calls me the special forces, right? So there were a couple times where we'll have a project, something will get started, but it's not going well, or there's an issue, or there are problems that need to be solved. I'll give you an example. We were building one of the largest IVF facilities in New Jersey. State of the art, very, very complex construction. You're dealing with human embryos, and the mechanical systems and air pressure, very, very complex construction. And in the beginning of the project, our head of construction, who had been with us for 25 years, said, I have to retire. It's my time. I'm not going to be able to see this project through. My phone rings. Hey, Luke, you're going to go build an IVF facility. And I said, what? And, and so I had to very, very quickly apply all of my construction background and develop a core competency in IVF development. And so we did that successfully, facility successful, and so on and so forth. So I've had a great opportunity working with my father. But I've also had the latitude, I would say, by choice or not by choice, to go in and go take some of these projects and deliver them.
That's interesting. And I'm thinking about how important it is to be able to pivot, and then how important it is to be able to learn and develop your skills quickly. And so what advice would you give for people about, any business that you're in? You're just constantly having to really learn and grow. And it's never just like, okay, Luke knows it all. Luke will always know it all, right? There's always something new that you're learning. So what tips would you give for people on the importance of that, or strategy around learning?
Listen. Listen to other people. You will never know everything. There is always somebody smarter than you. There is always somebody that has more subject matter expertise in something. So when we were building the IVF facility, you say, Luke, how in the world did you do that? Same thing with the marina. We were building the marina. I'd never built a marina before, right? But one of the keys to my success was listening to other people. And what a lot of those other people told me is to listen to people, ask questions. Oh, how does it, why is this working this way? Oh, can we do it that way? And if you can really objectively listen to people, people want to talk. People want to explain, if you're a subject matter expert in something, whether you're a plumber or a mechanic, HVAC, roofer, site guy, this, that, if you're willing to sit down and spend a couple minutes and tell me about what you're doing. Why are you doing it this way? Okay, what are the challenges? What do you think? What are the problems? Is everything okay? And if you can ask those kinds of questions, people will happily give you those answers. You just have to have the ability to listen, to synthesize that information, and that'll inform your own decision making going forward.
And by the way, that's back to ego too, because in order to ask questions and be curious and show, and you have to be willing to show people that you don't know it all. And so I would say that's actually a big part of that kind of leads into being a great leader, kind of eliminating that ego will also allow you to be able to learn and grow and other people's experience and recognizing that, when you see some of the greatest leaders, they create amazing teams of people that know things, know a lot about something. It's not that the leader knows everything. It's they know who to go to get those answers.
That's right. Most of the time, the leader knows less than everybody. Not knowing something doesn't make you a good leader. Getting people in the same room and listening to everybody and making informed decisions and, getting buy-in consensus, it's like 3 A's, you want to have accountability, and you want to have action, and you want to make sure that people are astute. You want to make sure that people are aware of what's going on, and that they're going towards the right action. As otherwise, everything's going to fail, and you'll never know why. I had a boss one time who would come in and scream and yell at everybody, and he would rule with fear. He would rule with fear, and by the way, sometimes that tactic works, right? I mean, you have to know when to do that. But it was never really my style, right? And I always thought to myself, if I were ever in a position of leading people and being in a management position, I would never behave this way. I would never do that because I saw how it felt. But that person didn't see what they were doing to the rest of the team. And it was a slow disintegration, right? Yeah, we were successful year one, a little less successful year two, and then the wheels started falling off year three. Why did that happen? Because you didn't get buy-in from everybody else. You're just coming in telling everybody because you know best, right? As opposed to saying, hey, sit down. You should treat the person at the theoretical bottom of the organization, or the person who has least amount of responsibility, the way you treat the CEO. I mean, there's just, everybody's a human person. Everybody plays a role. And I don't care whether you're cleaning the floors or whether, you're, making billion-dollar transactions, every role is important, right? And all these things need to work together in order to make the company work.
Yeah, so true. I heard yesterday, I was at an appointment, and the woman I was speaking to, she's becoming a registered nurse, and she's increasing her education. I'm like, oh, what are you going to do with that? She's like, nothing. I want to work here until like I'm done working. I just want to stay here forever. Yeah. Like that's my goal. And I just had this moment where I thought, wow, like the owner of this company has to be doing something incredibly right to have someone that's investing in themselves, growing their career, becoming better at what they do, but not wanting to leave. They want to stay. They want to grow with them. And I think that's, like, to your point about the employees that have been with you for 20 years. I think those are signs of great leadership, great culture, which is a big part of growing a company, achieving your goals, and big takeaways. And so obviously you do a lot of listening and you ask a lot of questions. Can you give our viewers some tips on what is it that Luke's listening to? Podcasts, books, any recommendations for us?
Yeah, sure. So I am a big fan of Barry Ritholtz, Masters in Business. Okay. I listen to that often. I think they've got some really, really wonderful guests. And I always thought that was something that sort of informed my decision making. I'm also a little bit of a science geek sometimes. So I like Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think it's always very interesting and also important in perspective to pull yourself out of, here we are on this earth. It's a wonderful place. We're all so fortunate to be alive and to be here. I think that's an important perspective to maybe start your day with, and to realizing, to the ego point, that what I'm dealing with is not the most important thing, right, in the world. So I like some of that stuff. That's interesting. I also recently read Huckleberry Finn. I reread Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, I've collected all of my books since like middle school and college, and so I'll periodically peel one off the shelf, and I don't necessarily read it cover to cover, but I'll read half of it, 3/4 of it, come in and out of it. And I read Huckleberry Finn, which was amazing. It's absolutely jarring and horribly racist.
Really?
Yeah.
But I read it. So I feel like everybody read Huckleberry Finn. I don't know why that's the book.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone read that as a kid.
Yeah. And I read it because I always think it's interesting to read different things from different times, right? Because I think, so much, the recency bias is so strong in all of us, right? What's going on now is the penultimate important thing right now, but, there's been a whole long world and a whole long history that's happened before us, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to periodically refresh that in your mind to say, oh, wow, like things were like this back then, or they spoke like this, or, certainly Mark Twain, being the Shakespeare of his generation, it's just fascinating to go back and to read some of that stuff. And I think it's a little different than what we might do otherwise. So that was one I peeled off the shelf recently.
What I'm hearing is like you're getting this this kind of like higher level sense of awareness of where you are and how big your problems are, or how kind of important it is in the grand scheme of things. I think when you look back in history, or maybe when you take a lens up and you look at the world and you look at science, you kind of put things in perspective, like, oh my gosh, we're here. I'm doing this. I can do this. I get to do this. And it's it is exciting, because sometimes I think we overcomplicate things. Sometimes I think we just make things a lot bigger than they really are. And when you take it into the now, and I'm thinking of that analogy of like getting under the water, under the waves and the storm, and just quieting down and being present, a lot of great things can happen. This is such a great episode.
Yeah, thank you. This is wonderful. It went awesome. So quickly.
It did go fast. I'm like, we ran over today.
Yeah. So this is my first podcast. So how did I do? Are you?
I think you did amazing. I love the fact that you brought some quotes to the table and some metaphors that I've never heard before, and I hope our listeners have gleaned some insight. I'm sure they have. I mean, doing what you do today, you have an extremely successful real estate development company. It's in your DNA. Leadership's in your DNA. So I think, I always say hosting a podcast, it's like you're like the student in the first row. You get to ask all the questions. I don't really need to prepare a ton of questions, because as you're talking, there's things I want to know and understand. And so hopefully I did a good enough job. Asking the right questions is really, to your point before, listening. It's a big skill development that I constantly want to enhance, is just asking better questions, listening. And so I hope the audience got a lot out of listening today. I'm sure they did. And so all of Luke's information will be in the description notes and the show notes. If you have comments, questions, reach out. Go check out One Willow if you want to see. Are you there at One Willow during the summer mostly? Or? Yeah.
So the management team there, they try to kick me out. You know what I mean? So I show up with all of my ideas. I'm like the glorified bean counter. So I come in and they say, Luke, get out of our way. We know what we're doing. And that's just fine with me. But usually catch me there on a nice day at the Tiki Bar, having a beverage of my choice.
So it's been a while since I've been back, but I'll be there this summer. So anything you need from real estate development, commercial properties, management of commercial real estate, big portfolios, and obviously like a great dining and drinking experience at the Jersey Shore, you could come check out Luke. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you again soon.